These countries will disappear from the map completely. When that happens, they will be swallowed by the sea in a few hours. Therefore, when these signs are seen, people must leave these cities as quickly as possible. Otherwise, billions of lives will be lost in other countries. Only the highest cities will remain, transformed into small islands. That was what Sigmund Freud heard from Edgar Cayce in 1935. When the young telegraph operator entered Edgar Cayce's room, the first thing he noticed was a small black sofa. We were in 1935, and at that time Sigmund Freud was still alive. He had turned the sofa into a famous symbol of psychoanalysis and therapy. However, the young man was not there for a therapy session. He was there to meet Edgar Cayce, the most renowned medium in the country. Cayce entered the room calmly and dressed elegantly. He explained to the young man that, contrary to what he had imagined, it was he who would lie on the sofa. So he took off his shoes, lay down, and entered a deep trance. A few minutes later, Cayce began murmuring various things about the past, the present, and the future. It was then that the young man realized that Cayce was not only speaking about his own life, but also about the lives of many people and events that would occur all over the world. Thus, Edgar Cayce became known as the Sleeping Prophet. Let us discover why. Edgar Cayce was born into a simple family of farmers in the interior of Kentucky. He was never an ordinary child. While other children played outdoors, Edgar preferred to dedicate his time to studying the Bible. Soon he began to explore the forest, where he claimed to have encounters with small beings resembling fairies. At the age of 11, while he was in the forest reading his Bible, he was surprised by a figure that he described as a woman with wings. She asked him what his greatest desire in life was, and Edgar replied that he wanted to help others, especially sick children. Later that day, after Mr. Edgar received a discouraging letter from the school regarding his son's performance, he decided to assess the boy's writing skills. Frustration took hold of him when he realized how deficient his son's learning was. In a fit of anger, Mr. Edgar knocked the boy from his chair to the floor. Astonished, the young Edgar, only 11 years old, heard a subtle voice belonging to the forest woman, whispering to him to rest his head on the school book and fall asleep. Upon awakening, something surprising happened. Edgar had absorbed the entire content of the book, word for word. From then on, he began a peculiar method of study, falling asleep on his books. By the end of the year, Edgar excelled in school, even being promoted to the next grade. His parents soon noticed something special about him. During a school break, Edgar suffered a spinal injury that left him partially paralyzed. That same night, while he slept, he murmured the ingredients for an herbal cure that, according to him, could repair his injuries. His parents, moved by hope, prepared the remedy exactly as their son had instructed, and to everyone's astonishment, the next morning, Edgar was completely recovered. Over time, Cayce, so he became known, developed a severe laryngitis, baffling even the most knowledgeable doctors. Later, he decided to seek help from a hypnotist. During the trance, Cayce revealed that his ailment was actually an emotional paralysis. The hypnotist then advised him to increase the blood circulation in the affected area. When they observed Cayce's throat turn a bright red, it became clear that something was happening. When he regained consciousness, he was completely cured. Cayce's fiancée was amazed, convinced that he possessed a divine gift granted by God that should be shared with the world. In this way, Edgar Cayce began performing readings for the sick and injured twice a day. In 1902, one particular reading stood out as a milestone in his journey. A little girl of only 5 years had been diagnosed with a fatal brain injury. Desperate, her parents turned to Edgar Cayce in search of a miracle. He surprised everyone by diagnosing that the true cause of the child's suffering was a spinal injury, and he suggested a treatment to realign her vertebrae. Within a few months, the little girl was completely recovered. From that moment on, Edgar Cayce's reputation grew exponentially, and he began to receive countless requests for help. For more than 40 years, he performed thousands of readings, not only identifying medical problems, but also offering predictions about the future. Many of these predictions materialized. Some were truly astonishing. 3 months before the collapse of the United States stock market in 1929, Cayce warned his investor friends to sell their shares. Those who ignored his advice ended up ruined in 1931. In 1933, he, predicted that the world economy would recover in the spring, which in fact occurred in January of 1934. Kais also anticipated Hitler's rise to power and his domination over Germany. Hitler became Führer in August of that year, and Kais stated that Hitler would remain in power until he was defeated by an external war in 1935. Additionally, he predicted the beginning of the Second World War, envisioning an alliance among Austria, Germany, and Japan, but he warned that the war would involve many nations. Kais also predicted that the United States would enter the war in 1941. He anticipated the deaths of Franklin D. Roosevelt and John F. Kennedy, as well as a period of civil and racial unrest during the 60s. In 1938, Kais mentioned the possibility that parts of temples would be discovered underwater near what is known as Bimini on the coast of Florida, and he predicted the resurgence of Atlantis in 1968, 3 decades later. In 1968, the existence of the Bimini Road was revealed in the Bahamas, just as Kais had foreseen. He described Atlantis as an ancient civilization as vast as Europe and endowed with advanced technology. Kais stated that Atlantis disappeared approximately 10,000 years ago, a victim of a great flood, a tale that resonates in the myths of various ancient civilizations, all recounting a similar catastrophe that occurred about 10,000 years ago in a distant past. Edgar Kais, famous for his prophetic visions, made a striking declaration during a period when the Soviet Union was at the height of its communist power. He proclaimed, "From Russia emerges the hope of the world, not through communism, but through freedom." Although it took some time to materialize, Russia returned to freedom in 1991 when the Soviet Union disintegrated. That event marked the decline of communism as the predominant system of government in Russia and its associated republics, paving the way for a series of reforms toward more open and democratic systems. The transition of Russia and its former Soviet territories toward freedom was a complex and challenging process, but it essentially confirmed Kais's vision of a future with greater freedom for the region. As early as 1934, Edgar Kais spoke about the Essenes, a little-known Jewish sect at that time. Surprisingly, he described this community with an impressive wealth of detail, addressing aspects of their beliefs and practices that had not yet been validated by archaeological discoveries. However, Kais predicted that important documents and records about the Essenes would eventually be unearthed, 12 years after his predictions. This came to pass in 1946, when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found by Bedouins in the caves of Qumran. These scrolls, containing religious texts and writings of the community, confirmed many of Kais's descriptions from years before and provided an unprecedented understanding of the life and history of that mysterious sect, greatly enriching the historical and religious knowledge of the era. Kais became known for his remarkable predictions, many of which proved correct on certain occasions, garnering headlines, while his errors went unnoticed. Moreover, Kais often used expressions such as "perhaps" and "I think," instead of making categorical declarations, a common technique among psychics known as the Barnum effect, a psychological phenomenon that causes people to accept vague descriptions as if they applied exclusively to them. In many cases, Kais received letters from sick people and during his readings provided diagnoses and even prescriptions for treatment. However, he did not know that, when he was in a trance, some of those people were already dead. Kais's supporters argue that if those people had applied the treatments while they were alive, they might have benefited from them. It is true that if Edgar Kais were truly communicating with spirits or with the universe, one might expect some kind of warning when he made mistakes in his predictions. However, there always seemed to be a convenient excuse to justify his errors. It is difficult to determine with certainty whether Edgar Kais was a legitimate psychic. He was never unmasked as an imposter, and many people sincerely believe that he saw what he claimed to see. A recent study interviewed thousands of American adults with similar characteristics in income, education, and academic performance, and found that 50% of them believe in some form of psychic phenomenon. Moreover, the research revealed that people who do not believe in psychics tend to have a more structured and analytical approach to their thinking, whereas those who do believe in psychic phenomena tend to be more emotional and creative, in contrast to skeptics, who adopt a more analytical and structured approach. The study highlighted that believers are not necessarily naive or lacking critical thinking skills. However, It was found that those supposedly naive were actually happier in their lives and had significantly lower stress levels than skeptics. When it comes to psychic phenomena or supernatural aspects of religion, we are dealing with issues that defy scientific explanation, yet it is undeniable that these phenomena offer comfort to the bereaved, hope to the less fortunate, and a framework for an existence that, at best, may seem chaotic. Although the supernatural exists, we cannot state with certainty what it is. What we know is that most psychics nowadays are fraudulent. It is true that Edgar Cayce never accepted money for his services, demonstrating a genuine desire to help others. Whether he was indeed a legitimate psychic or merely someone with delusions may not be so relevant. What matters is recognizing the need for more people willing to dedicate their lives to helping others, people who do not see themselves as the center of the universe, but as part of a greater community where mutual care is essential. Finally, concerning the prediction about the shifting of the poles, Edgar Cayce pointed to the year 1998 as the moment for that event, although that year has already passed. The discovery by NASA brought a new perspective. They observed that the Earth's poles, where the ice is found furthest north and south, have shifted slightly since 1998. Although this may seem like an insignificant phenomenon, its consequences can be significant, as the shifting of the poles is a matter that scientists are investigating with great interest, seeking to understand its causes and the possible impacts on global climate and the environment. This shift could influence the climate in various regions by modifying temperature patterns and even the behavior of animals, and it is a serious topic that NASA continues to study to enhance our understanding of the planet. However, it is fair to acknowledge that Edgar Cayce has his critics. Even though he performed more than 14,000 readings, and some of his predictions proved correct on certain occasions, receiving widespread attention in the headlines while his errors went unnoticed. Moreover, Cayce used expressions such as perhaps and I think, instead of making categorical statements, a common technique among psychics known as the Barnum effect, a psychological phenomenon that leads people to accept vague descriptions as uniquely applicable to themselves. In many cases, Cayce received letters from sick individuals, and during his readings provided diagnoses and even treatment prescriptions. However, he did not know that when he was in a trance, some of those individuals were already dead. Cayce's defenders argue that if those people had applied the treatments while they were alive, they might have benefited from them. It is true that if Edgar Cayce were truly communicating with spirits or with the universe, one might expect some sort of warning when he made mistakes in his predictions. However, there always seemed to be a convenient excuse to justify his errors. For example, on one occasion he gave the location of a buried pirate treasure, which led people from all over the world to set out in search of it without success. Cayce's supporters suggested that perhaps the ghosts of Native Americans or pirates were playing tricks on them. It is difficult to determine with certainty whether Edgar Cayce was a legitimate psychic. He was never unmasked as an imposter, and many people sincerely believe that he saw what he claimed to see. A recent study interviewed thousands of American adults with similar characteristics in income, education, and academic performance, and found that 50% of them believe in some form of psychic phenomenon. Moreover, the research revealed that people who do not believe in psychics tend to have a more structured and analytical approach to their thinking, whereas those who believe in psychic phenomena tend to be more emotional and creative, in contrast to skeptics, who adopt a more analytical and structured approach. The study highlighted that believers are not necessarily naive or lacking in critical thinking skills. However, it was discovered that those supposedly naive were actually happier in their lives and had significantly lower stress levels than the skeptics. When it comes to psychic phenomena or supernatural aspects of religion, we are dealing with matters that defy scientific explanation. Yet it is undeniable that these phenomena offer comfort to the bereaved, hope to the less fortunate, and a framework for an existence that, at best, may seem chaotic. Regardless of whether his psychic ability is real or not, we need more people who follow the example of Edgar Cayce. Now more than ever, this video has been well received. Leave your comment and do not forget to subscribe to the channel to receive more content like this.